Linda, welcome.
Thank you.
So your company makes hot sauce, is that right?
Apparently we do. So what Jemima's talking about is 24 hours ago, GE put on sale the hottest hot sauce there is. So hot that we had to encase it in the same materials you would use to make a jet engine part.
Wow, that is hot.
It's hot. And we put it on sale yesterday for $20, sold out in, I guess, about 30 minutes, and somebody emailed me that it was on eBay this morning for nearly $300.
Wow.
But we do other things besides make hot sauce.
Yeah, so you started with light bulbs,
Yes.
you've ended up with hot sauce. What was in between?
Exactly. So, quite a bit. So GE has been through what has to be one of the biggest transformations of a company. Our chairman, Jeff Immelt, likes to say that he has both bought and sold $100 billion worth of assets. So once upon a time, GE was a company that you thought of for light bulbs and appliances. Today, GE is what we call a digital industrial company. We are concentrated in three areas: health, energy, transportation. We've shed a lot of our financial services assets. We sold our appliances division. It'll still retain the GE name, but we sold it to a Chinese company called Haier. And a big part of our storytelling these days is around becoming this company that sort of sits at the intersection of physical and digital. And we try, I'll loop in hot sauce here to sort of give you guys an idea as to why we would do something that might sound so lighthearted. One of our big challenges is, as a company, everybody knows GE. I mean, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I would say most of you would raise your hand if I asked if you knew GE. The challenge is, do you know the GE that we want you to know? Do you know that we're a company that's about innovation, science, technology, material science, that we're constantly pushing the envelope? And are you excited about us? So we've tried very hard in our storytelling to do things that make you sort of fall in love with the company all over again. So that's where something like hot sauce comes about. You know, it's about the science of hot. And we decided to do this in a way that's physical, so that you could actually, you know, buy this. I sort of so wish I had a picture. Couldn't get it in my luggage.
You should have brought some with you.
I should have
You
brought
could have
some
plugged
to
it.
New Orleans, exactly.
So we hear a lot about legacy businesses that are having to try and understand and adapt quite quickly to new technologies. The GE has obviously had some success in doing that, and hence sort of redefining its business properties. What are the inherent challenges in that? And perhaps what are the secrets as well? How has GE been able to redefine its business in that way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you don't get to be 124 years old unless you constantly reinvent, unless you constantly question. You know, we sometimes like to think of ourselves, and I think one of the business magazines recently did a cover story, and they said 124-year-old startup. And when I think about that, it's really true. Our scientists, and we have thousands and thousands of scientists. Some are with us today. We have this great little display of what's called a digital twin power plant down there. But our scientists are constantly asking, sort of as Thomas Edison did many years ago, what does the world need? And I think when you do that, when you think about not just new technologies, but new ways to bring it to market, new business models, it moves you forward. And I would say, Jemima, the same thing in marketing. You know, we like to think of ourselves as a brand in motion, as a brand that doesn't stay still. And as a result, we're constantly thinking about what's that next platform? What's a way for us to channel what is at the heart, at the DNA of GE, but show it in our marketing and our brand as well.
So tell us about some of the new projects and new platforms that you've been experimenting with, and perhaps the storytelling that you've been doing through this.
Yeah, no, of course. So, you know, there's so many. We have been an early adopter at GE of innumerable tech platforms, whether it was Instagram nearly 6 years ago, whether it was Meerkat when it first blew up at South
Remember
by.
that.
Remember that? 2 South bys ago, or maybe it was only 1 South by ago. He said one South by ago. Wow, time goes fast. Snapchat, we went on Snapchat really early with emoji science. we took emojis, which we all know and love and use billions of times a day, and created the emoji periodic table as a way to make people sort of fall in love with science and make science easy and relatable to understand. More recently, we've been on platforms like Micmac. Micmac, for people who don't know, and many of you probably do in this audience, is kind of Saturday Night Live meets Home Shopping Network. So you have stand-up comedians talking about products. We did something with a connected light bulb on Micmac. We've been on platforms like Poncho, the weather platform, which we love. So we kind of look for the new very unapologetically. We feel like it matches the brand.
But how do you make sure that you don't get too distracted by all the great big shiny things? Because there's always a new service or a new platform or a new trend, whether it's, I don't know, VR or AR or MR or AI or any number of...
Let's come up with more. Let's come up with more initials, right?
Loads to do. How do you make sure you stay true to what you really need to do and not get distracted?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, what we've done, and it's worked well for us, is I actually carved out a few people on my team that sit in what we call a disruption lab. And their job is very purposefully...
That sounds fun.
It is fun. It is fun. I wish I could come back and be in that job. Their job is very purposely, deliberately to look around corners. And that's great because it sort of says everybody else on the team, not that we're not about the new, but we've also got to make sure that we're telling the big stories, the stories about the fact that a third of the world doesn't yet have electricity, about remote healthcare, about, as we talked about, digital and physical coming together, digital industrial. But, you know, by sort of inculcating innovation, inculcating disruption, and saying, okay, if we're not thinking about what's around the corner, it's going to pass us by. It feels like a lost opportunity. And maybe the other thing I'd say is the cost, the opportunity to try new platforms is pretty low. I mean, it's not a big lift for us because we've got talented people who are on these platforms anyway to think about what is that intersection between GE and a platform.
I know that this is maybe your secret weapon, but tell me about working with millennials.
So I have a wildly talented team, wildly talented. Many of them are young. And, you know, shocker, I did not grow up in the digital age. I did not start on Snapchat, Twitter, Vine, any of these others. I'm on most of them now, but I think when you are native to the platforms, when you've grown up on these platforms, it's a bit of a competitive advantage. And I think the fact that a lot of the team is just sort of lives their life out loud, so to speak, on these platforms, I think is helpful. I'd also say, and this is true of the entire team, millennial or me, I think there's sort of this innate curiosity to the people on our team. I think it matches the curiosity of the company, right? You know, there's this great Edison quote, which I am certain I'll get wrong, so give me a little slack if you tweet it, which is something like, I didn't fail in creating the light bulb, I just found 10,000 ways that I didn't succeed. So there's this innate curiosity on the team, and I think the so-called millennials on the team, I think, are sort of, you know, represent that in a concentrated way.
So if you have millennials on the team being, you know, innate and instinctive and curious and just having enormous energy because they're young, and trying loads of stuff, and then you have a kind of disruption team as well, how do you let the rest of the staff know that innovation isn't something that happens over there, that actually everyone has an obligation to think that way?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, you can't sort of, I think in any organization, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, sort of say, well, those people are innovative and creative and you're not, because we all are that way. And I think what we've tried to do, and hopefully been, you know, relatively successful at it, is think about where media and marketing are headed. And that's everybody's job. We've tried to think about how to tell stories in a way that really engage people. I was listening earlier to the guys from Upworthy and The Onion, and I know GE is not like Upworthy and The Onion, but as I listened to them, it was exactly, Jemima, the same language that we use around our offices. How do you make people care? How do you make them share? How do you tell stories? I think that's our panel, right? Storytelling. How do you tell stories that are infectious, that really make people fall in love? And that's everybody's job. So if it's okay, I'll give you an example. Guess maybe a month or two ago, we created this film series. We just did it online. Who knows, maybe it'll get into linear television at some point, called Unimpossible Missions. And we took common idioms, a snowball's chance in hell, lightning in a bottle, talking to a wall, and we used these idioms to storytell. So we created films that show how GE does the impossible. So we took a snowball and we put it in, sort of molten lava metal, and showed how the technology that we have is so strong that it's protective. It's protective of anything. It's the kind of technology that you want on your jet engines and your locomotives and other machines. So, that's just great storytelling. Just great drama storytelling, and that's everybody's job.
And tell us about podcasting as well, because this is something else that you've really embraced, and there's a huge resurgence in podcasting.
So I'm an audio junkie, personally. I read an enormous amount, but I listen to all of it. I love Audible. I must listen to, 50, 60 books a year. And I believe that there's an intimacy from audio, and perhaps that's part of why it's having a resurgence. Who knows? So last fall, we created something called the GE Podcast Theater. Now, nobody in this audience or on this stage is old enough to remember GE Theater with Ronald Reagan, but once upon a time, this was incredibly popular in the 50s. Ronald Reagan was the host of GE Theater. And so we kind of sometimes at GE love this idea of sort of reminding people of our relevance and also pushing the envelope forward. And this was a great example. So we sort of took this page from the past, GE Theater, turned it into GE Podcast Theater, and created a War of the Worlds-esque sci-fi podcast within a podcast. And we launched it last fall, kind of as an experiment, which is, I'd say a lot of the time, things we do